Miyazaki versus Pixar. Take one. Three. This is my boyfriend.
No.
Hello, everyone. This is Bird. You may know him as Bird. His real name is Bird.
Untrue.
Some people think his name is Bert.
I can't believe that. Do I look like a Bert?
Someone asked me, it was like, is your boyfriend's name Bert? And I was like, so we just finished filming this video and realized that our intro was trash.
I wasn't amped up enough.
Yeah, we weren't amped up. We didn't get on the Miyazaki high until now. Oh, yeah, let's make a movie, baby. What if they could talk? They could race, and there's a sexy car. So today, we are going to be discussing Studio Ghibli films and Pixar films. A chaotic, nonsensical ramble between two birds.
Neither of us are experts on anything.
Neither of us know very much at all.
No. I haven't even seen, like, a lot of Ghibli or Pixar. You know, I've seen, like, the big ones, but...
I've actually never watched a movie, so this is going to be really hard for me.
Yeah.
We wanted to just discuss the differences, and we are definitely biased. This is not an unbiased review. It is a very biased review. And
we have not been paid by Studio Ghibli.
We would love to be paid by Studio Ghibli. If
Miyazaki, if you're watching, I love you.
I love you. We don't even want to be sponsored. No. We just love you. We've picked 5 different subheadings that we would like to discuss, and they are as follows, which I have memorized, and I'm not reading off my phone. The concept, the art style,
story and plot,
viewing experience for children and adults. This is terrible. I hate it.
This is gonna be especially confusing because my drink is over
empty. No,
now.
wait, don't bring it up.
Don't be fooled.
It's the end of the video. You know what we have to say? We say, "Good morning, Beth."
Okay, good morning, Beth.
We've got our bubble teas. We've got taro, pumpkin spice. We've got lemon cake.
This actually feels very appropriate for Miyazaki.
That's why I was going for it, yeah. And I've got a bowl full of berries. A few weeks ago, Bird and I watched The Secret Life?
Yeah.
The Secret Life of Arrietty. And we both cried. And it was so beautiful that it has now spurred me to make a video. And I kind of thought it would be fun to compare it to other films I watched as a child, namely Pixar. Did you watch Pixar films as a kid?
Not really. My parents weren't really big Pixar people. I saw them later in life.
And I saw them when I was quite young, so I feel like we have a different perspective.
Like, I saw Monsters, Inc. for the first time when I was, like, in high school, I think.
Ooh, I feel like that wouldn't be funny.
Yeah, like, white kids get taken to Pixar movies when they're 4, right? Yeah. It's like a rite of passage. So
we wanted to compare Pixar films with Miyazaki films in a really cute way with bubble tea. And that's what we're going to do, okay? Beth, you following?
It's all for you, man.
It's all for you. All right, so let's start with concept. Let's just chat. Let's just chat. Do you have a favorite Pixar movie?
What? Name some Pixar movies.
Up, Toy Story, WALL-E, Monsters, Inc. I think is great. And I even thought Inside Out was pretty good. I was like, it wasn't a childhood film of mine, obviously, because it came out like in 2014 or something.
I mean, I liked Up. Yeah. Oh, I think WALL-E was probably one of the cuter ones. One
of the best ones. Yeah. I think WALL-E is a fabulous film. We have nothing against, well, we have something against Pixar. But I would say this is, like, not that biased, but it really is. We're just talking about what we prefer. So, for me, personally, I think that Pixar has fabulous concepts. Like, the way... you definitely know that any intern could be like, yo, what if the monsters collected the screams?
Is Cars a Pixar movie?
Yeah, but we don't want to talk about Cars.
Well, no, I'm thinking of, like... Because they pick, like, a...
They pick, like, a thing.
Yeah, like, the characters are gonna be robots or toys or cars. Which, I mean, not to be terribly cynical, but, like, they can sell action figures of that, right? Like, that's probably, like, a major motivation for picking these things. You're not totally wrong.
Yeah, they definitely... I feel like Pixar definitely focuses on non-human stories. It's something that's familiar for children, but also something that you've never thought about in that way before. Do you know what I mean? Like with Toy Story, you know, everyone's got toys or whatever. But I feel like the really great thing about Toy Story was the system that they existed in was so complex and thought out, and they had like code words if people were coming and they would all fall down and like...
Red alert! Red alert! Andy is coming upstairs!
Sergeant, repeat! Resume your positions now!
Andy's coming, everybody! Back to your places! Hurry!
You know, it was it was as if that whole universe really existed, and you were kind of getting a peek into it, and there was lots of, inside jokes and Easter eggs.
I feel like it's also an artifact of like they didn't really want to animate human characters, which is why if you watch Toy Story,
Yeah, the human characters are scary.
The bully, what's his name, Sid, is like easily the worst looking part of that film. Yeah.
Well, so The Secret Life of Ariete, which is the reason we're making this film, is pretty it's like a pretty basic story. It's like small people exist. Like really, that's if you had to pick 3 words to describe a movie.
Yeah. I think one of the differences is that Pixar they have like they hone in on like a specific universe, like toys, post-apocalypse robot, cars, whatever. But the Miyazaki films tend to have a much more like, magic essentially is the thing, right? Like, Spirited Away has like 100 different kinds of spirits. Like, you could even potentially see them all existing in kind of the same world, like all the different creatures and stuff like that.
That's true.
It's not thematically like honed in on one specific thing. Like,
I think each film has its own take on the magic. But it does feel like it could be a Miyazaki universe.
It's quite eclectic, right? It's like pick and match. Like there's a radish spirit, but also there's like a witch and then borrowers are, kind of vaguely. It's like Aesop's Fables kind of thing.
There's lots of other stories that are branching off out of it, but you've picked this like lane, and it feels like the lore of Miyazaki is ancient. It doesn't quite feel like the movie was made for you in some way. It kind of feels like
because they're drawing on like old mythological like dragons, witches, it's quite that like eclectic pick and mix.
But I never thought about that before, that really like nothing, I don't think anything like intrinsically ties all of the Miyazaki films together, and maybe it's just like the art style, but you really can see like Totoro and like the radish spirit living in the same world, but they just like haven't met.
They live in like different pockets of the spirit
of the world,
magic dimension. A car from Cars would never like meet Buzz Lightyear, presumably.
Well, I don't know. There's like lots of Pixar fan theories about the connectedness of the world.
The sheer like implausibility and like I don't know, like insanity of that theory. It's like a 20-page dossier of like in the reflection of Buzz's eyes, you see an alien from like. Whereas you don't really have to do that. You don't need a grand unifying theory for Miyazaki. It's just they just conceptually seem like related.
Yeah, they do. With Pixar, it's almost like a micro-universe.
It's more sci-fi than fantasy in that sense. In that
Pixar?
Yeah. Like, they pick their race or their people or whatever, and they populate things around that.
Yeah, but I do want to say, like, with concepts specifically, Pixar runs with those ideas in some ways that are so smart and clever. Like, in Inside Out, when they've got the abstract thought section of the brain and everyone like turns into Picasso characters and stuff, and like there's another scene where they're like getting rid of old telephone numbers and stuff. Like, it's really quite clever. Like, they create this set of rules within whatever sphere they're going for, and then they really deep dive into like, okay, if this is what happens, if memories are stored in orbs, what, how would things be cleaned out? How do you get rid of stuff? Like, and then, that's how I feel like a lot of the humor comes from, is like the interpretation of the world that they've created. Like
the inner workings of that universe.
Yeah, and so I feel like you as a viewer are kind of given bones of the world that is being explored. So like in WALL-E, robots are cleaning up the planet and the people are in space and they got fat. And that's like, that's pretty like the basic structure. So then within that, it's like, oh, well, if there's this, robot, then there's a girl robot.
There's a highly rigorously laid out and quite limited like world system. Like limited in the sense that there are like clear bounds to the universe. And I think you said clever, and clever is the right word. Because it's like, in Pixar, the concept is kind of the point. It's like...
it's like definitely it started with, this would be really cool. Like, imagine if, like, Cars were... You know what I mean?
I don't know why I forgot that Cars is a Pixar movie. It's really... Like, Miyazaki, more fable and a little more, like, eclectic. And they don't really, like, expand on the inner workings of the universe too much.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about it. And I was saying that earlier. Like, it doesn't feel like a movie is being made about the universe. It just feels like something is happening and you're getting to see a very small portion of it and you don't get to see the rest.
Yeah, and a lot of it isn't explained, right?
Which I have always wondered about those giant ducks in the tub in Spirited Away. I'm like, what are they? I want them. I want to hug one. I mean, even like major plot points in Miyazaki films, like I feel like are never explained. Like even the river spirit in Spirited Away, it was like a huge plot point. and was the catalyst for, getting the whatever. Like, everything happened around that. But I'm like, what was it? Why was it covered in goo? Like, how did he get a bicycle stuck in him?
But in Pixar, like, the point is to get it eventually, right? Like,
yeah.
In WALL-E, the first, like, half or so is mysterious, because you're like, what happened? Like, where are all the humans? But then in the second half, they explain everything.
I think that's not true. Pixar actually gives you everything you need to know right off the bat. Like, in Monsters, Inc., it's like we got main big monster guy, Sully, working out, and then small little sidekick green dude, and they're going to work, and they work at the monster factory. I don't remember what it's called. They harvest screams. Screams. It's very different. And and then there's like an ad that says, "Our screams keep the city well lit." Like, they really give you everything you need in the first like 10 minutes, like 5 minutes. It's so that because they really go into such detail and because they fully explore whatever universe they've chosen, you need to like get the root of it very quickly in order to then like not have to worry about like what the fuck is going on. Miyazaki films feel like you're looking at a small piece of a larger world, and Pixar films feel like you're getting a very close look at a small, like, insulated world. So my closing thought for concept for Miyazaki and Pixar, both valid, both interesting. One, I think, is...
better.
I think Miyazaki films expect a little bit more from their audience to fill in the gaps, and they trust their viewers with not having to be fed, like, every single detail.
Over-explanation is an American mainstay, certainly. Art style.
I think that we are both pretty biased on this one.
Yeah. Miyazaki's better because it's hand-drawn, and that's just, like, an ageless thing.
I don't think it's all hand-drawn.
No, but I'm saying, like, for the most part, Pixar's CGI and Miyazaki is, like, heavily, like, majority hand-drawn stuff, or at least, has the look and feel of hand-drawn stuff.
I think the tricky thing when comparing, Pixar through the ages is that, like, I remember seeing the first Toy Story. So I'm single now, guys. I don't know if I remember seeing the first Toy Story and being mind blown at, like, how realistic it looked. And looking back at it now, clearly it's not. But I think that's just any technology-based media, whether it's like VR or even like cell phones and graphics and stuff, camera quality, like, you just, it's clearly increasing in quality. However, the last Toy Story film was unbelievably animated. Like, my brain literally cannot... There's this one scene with a cat that made news. It's like a cat stretching in the sunshine in the antique store. And it made, like, headline news because people actually were mad. They thought it was live action. When I'm watching a Pixar film, I feel a sense of awe. Let me just see a minute. I'm just getting off a little bit more. I'm literally talking about feeling awe-inspired. And you're
like toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet paper. The sheer amount of work that would have gone into whatever I'm looking at. And a lot of the detail, I think, as well. Like, I feel like when I'm watching a Pixar film, there's always more to see. Like, there's always, like, tiny little details. At the crosswalk in Monsters, Inc., there's, like, little monsters on them instead of people. It's like, there for a second. And some dude probably spent 3 days animating a little monster on this stop sign. And it's so clever. Like, again, back with the concept. I think that Pixar uses the digital animation to really, like, cram as much stuff into the videos, into the movies, as possible.
Lots of little Easter eggs and stuff.
Yeah, like Easter eggs. And I think with Miyazaki films, because it's hand-drawn, I feel like they have to be much more selective about what is going to make it and what's really important. And, I mean, when we were watching The Secret Life of Arietti, like, you could pause the movie, every frame.
Yeah.
Every frame of painting. Man, I wish that guy was still on YouTube. You can really tell that the focus is on hand-drawn, and I think it makes it timeless, and I guess I think it's more beautiful as well.
It is beautiful. Like, I look at even simple things, like, in Arietti, one of the coolest things to me was the way water behaves.
Oh my god.
And it's one of those things that the moment you see it, you're like, oh, of course, this is the only way. Because they're so small, they have, like, little teapots and stuff like that. And I think, like, immediately you'd be like, oh yeah, they like pour tea into a cup. But because they're tiny,
And their teacup is tiny.
it's like
Teapot.
a little, they incorporate surface tension into the
Yeah.
water. So like a little blob comes out of the teapot and then hangs
super
there
slowly.
for a moment and then lands in the cup. I think
yeah.
it's the same reason I appreciate like an impressionist painting more than a hyper-realist
Yeah,
painting.
that's so true.
Because you look at the way...
That's so true, man. That's such a good analogy. I've always said this, and I feel like I'm going to get canceled for saying it. But sorry, continue.
Well, you look at like a Monet's impression of like the water lilies, say, and it's beautiful because it's not. It has nothing to do with
Yeah.
verisimilitude, right? It's like it conveys the impression of something. Whereas you look at like a hyper-realist picture of the same thing of like water lilies, say, and you're like, it's cool.
The thing I feel, it's the same thing I feel when looking at the antique shop scenes in Toy Story 4. I feel awe-inspired, and then I kind of forget about it.
At the sheer like detail, you're like,
Yeah,
wow, this is so close to real.
Like this would be so much work. That's kind of
Yeah.
what goes through my head. I'm like, wow, this looks so real, and this would be so much work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mostly what I feel. And I think those two things are not very. They're not like passion feelings. Oh no.
It really's coming down.
Oh my
So
god.
cozy.
They're not very like passionate feelings, but when I'm watching a Studio Ghibli film, I feel it in my soul, and like I think about the scenes. I honestly,
We sat there for like an hour after Area 2.
yeah,
and
just we like scrubbed through the movie and we're like, yep, that's beautiful, that's beautiful. Honestly, I would decorate my house in the style of their little tiny
Their house is like one of the coolest things
Coolest
I've ever
things.
seen in a Ghibli movie. Like they're tiny little, and the way like everything is obviously repurposed because they're tiny, they're borrowers. Everything is a repurposed small thing.
So
that's
you can
been
like
turned into a big thing.
You can look at it and be like, oh, that's like a pin, and that's
Yeah.
like a. If this is not a universal experience, I feel like every single person who watched Spirited Away wanted to eat that one dumpling.
Yeah, food.
So bad.
I think
oh my
food
god.
in Ghibli movies is another
Yeah.
huge like.
It's like I mean, it's such a famous thing now.
Yeah.
People talk about it a lot, but
There's like Instagram accounts dedicated
just to Miyazaki
But
food.
it makes sense. Like I think people really appreciate that like loving rendering of detail, and the same thing in Ariete and in,
But in-
Spirited Away.
In mundane things, like
Yeah.
I honestly think that Miyazaki films, Studio Ghibli films have given me a newfound appreciation for the minutia, like the beauty in the minutia of everyday life. Like I think
Yeah, it's a good.
there's this great quote. I think it's by Bradley Trevor Grieve. It was in a journal that I had, and it said, "Nothing is ordinary if you examine it closely enough. Delight in the deliciously mundane." Isn't that great? And I've
That's very applicable too.
Yeah.
I feel like I see something and it's like I don't know, like a hairpin in a studio something movie. I'm like, wow, that's
Wow.
so. Look at the shine on that. Look at the
Yeah.
highlight. Or
Yeah, it
like
makes you-
dumplings. You just look at a dumpling and they eat it with relish, and you're like, oh, dumplings are so beautiful. It's more art than entertainment, I think, which is like one of the main probably dividers between Pixar and Ghibli. Like,
That's a good point. Yeah. One is made for entertainment, which is, again, not a bad thing to be made for entertainment.
Yeah.
But I think it's very clear, especially as a kid, when you're consuming both kinds of media, what things stick with you and what things, like, really impacted me as a kid. Like, I never pretended I was a Toy Story toy. I pretended I was Chihiro. Because she
Yeah.
was awesome. Like, she was so fucking cool.
Also, maybe
And Haku was
because-
a cutie pie, okay?
and maybe because the gaps they leave in the story lend themselves to kids play acting and stuff like that. Whereas with Toy Story, you're like
The story, it
universe
gets
is
closed.
delimited.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, they're toys. They have to act like this sometimes. They have to act like that sometimes, and you can't really be a part of that. I mean, I'm sure your kids can, but Ghibli is much more open to that. I feel like
In Ghibli films, yeah, the child or whoever can insert themselves into the universe and play. And in Pixar films, you need to buy the toy to play. You know what I mean? Like it's like
you got to get a Buzz Lightyear.
or a Woody doll, and like then you can be Andy. Oh, you know what? I do want to mention
Beth,
as
close
well
your ears.
for art style, Coco. Have you seen Coco?
No, what's
Oh my
that?
god, it's a Mexican Day of the Dead story where like this kid goes off into like the underworld. Straight
Awesome.
up Mexico. Straight up Coco was again one of the most beautiful movies ever. It was so beautiful, and hats off to whoever came up with that. Stunning.
Sombreros off. In fact,
I don't think we can say that. Stunning. So beautiful. But in a very different way again. And everyone's kind of shiny. Maybe that's the thing that I find disconcerting about Pixar films. Everyone's really like round
Glossy.
and shiny. I think that's maybe the closing point for art style.
Ghibli is better.
Yeah, I would say Ghibli wins this one. This is going very well. It's going to be hell to edit. The next category is
Lemon cakes.
Story and plot. I feel like this is directly related to concept, but I do think that there are some distinctions, and I think it has to do with a closed plot and an open plot. And I think we were talking about this at the end of Arietti. I love saying the name. Arietti.
Arietti.
One of the saddest things and also the best things about Miyazaki films, Ghibli, is that the endings are never quite neat.
Yeah.
They're always a little bit sad. I feel like the universe is left in a way that more stories can be told. Not that you need to hear, like, not that they need sequels, but I mean, like Haku and Chihiro, you know, they have to leave because she's 12 or whatever. And it's like, in Hollywood, you know, they'd have to stay together, or one would have to die or something, you know what I mean? It's like, it
Well,
always needs to be finished. But I think with every Ghibli film that I've seen, for the most part, you know, with Arietti, she has to leave her new friend.
Yeah.
And like, man, we were in tears.
Yeah, I was
Oh, I'm
blubbering.
gonna like cry again. It's so beautiful. It's so tender and sweet, and then it's so fleeting. And I think that's the big thing about Ghibli films. Well, I can't keep saying that. That's the thing, but it's one element of Ghibli films that you kind of need. It's this. The films exist in one moment, and then that moment passes, and that's what makes them so beautiful.
It's that they hit that bittersweet note perfectly, because it's like, it's a wonderful adventure and like the friends you make and everything, but then it has to end.
Yeah.
But the very fact of its ephemerality is what makes it beautiful in the first place.
And if it was eternal, it wouldn't have the same beauty to it. And
Yeah, like I always get the sense in some way that like Ghibli movies are about the end of childhood, or like childhood being, they have that reverence towards childhood as well as, you know, like everyday objects we're talking about, right? Like it doesn't last for that long actually, and there are like some magical, like beautiful aspects to it, but then it has to come to an end, and that's okay. I'm not inclined to be cynical about Ghibli movies, like, at all. I don't know if that's just a personal bias, but like, I don't know. Sometimes,
I think they're earnest. I think the big thing is they're so earnest. They're not joking about. They're not making short jokes about the borrowers. You know what I mean? It's not a punchline.
Yeah, it's not quip. And actually, that's like a major thing. They're not funny, really. In the same, like, I laugh at Ghibli movies sometimes, but it's because of how, like, interesting or, like, odd
like the ducks in the bath, and they go.
It's kind of a bemused, like,
Yeah.
interested,
Yeah.
like, chuckle.
Like the soot sprites always made me laugh, but not because they were, you know, being dumb. Like when one of them drops the rock on top of themselves because Chihiro, like, do you remember the scene?
Yeah.
Chihiro, like,
Yeah.
helps throw the rocks into the oven, and then they're like, well, we don't have to work, so they just, like, drop the rocks themselves, and then they all do it, and their little arms are wiggling. It's so funny, but it's not because it's, like, dumb jackass humor where someone's getting hurt. It's just, like, imagining
Silly
that these
little
little soot
creatures,
sprites
yeah.
don't want to be working.
It happens in Arietti too. When she like steps or like something hits
Something
her,
happens.
her whole body kind of like flaunces
her
a little.
hair.
Her hair and her like face and her clothing, her little dress, it all like.
Yeah.
Whoosh. I am disinclined to be cynical about Studio Ghibli movies generally. Sometimes I'm watching a Pixar movie. I don't know if it's like placebo or I'm just like. I'm not saying like the entire movie is an exercise in profit grabbing, but I think like there's a certain amount of like Hollywood-ish emotional orchestration that goes on where it's like
In Ghibli or Pixar?
in Pixar where it's like, you know, like and now cry.
To be fair, that one scene where Bing Bong, the clown elephant or whatever, he like sacrifices himself.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I remember being like,
Come on, Joy, one more time. I got a feeling about this one. Bing bong, bing bong, it's rockin' like the elephant. Bing bong, bing bong, who's got like sway? Bing bong, bing bong, louder, louder, Joy, sing louder.
Bing bong! We did it!
take her to the moon for me. Okay?
Why am I so upset?
they're sad. I know they're
They're
sad.
tender, but it's so clearly like,
They're
be
meant to
sad!
Yeah, it's a little like,
cry! And I was like,
if you're a bird,
fine.
I'm a bird. Yeah, and then you're like, all right, I'm sad. Thanks, I'm sad now. I know there's Ghibli is a studio, obviously, but I really don't get the same sense of like emotional manipulation.
Well-
Manipulation is a strong word.
I mean, it kind of is.
Yeah.
Not as strong. I mean, it is a strong, but I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think, you know what's actually quite interesting? I remember an interview with Miyazaki who said, he basically said, I was talking to like my neighbor's niece or I don't remember who it was, some young child, who made it very clear to me that like having a human, a normal kid who is able to accomplish amazing things, not because they're magical, they have courage, whatever it is. But as a young kid, like as a young girl, honestly, I felt like I could do anything, especially because Chihiro was kind of like a suck at the beginning. Like she cried all the time and she didn't know what to do and she was scared and I mean her parents had turned into pigs. This is not a critique. She has every reason, and I think she was
11.
like 12 or
Yeah.
something, 10 or 12. So
But then she bucks up.
She bucks
and
up,
she
but
deals
she
with
does it.
and
And,
goes
like,
on this adventure.
I was such a frightened kid. I was such like I was a mama's girl, whatever. Like I don't know what I would have done without my parents if they had turned into pigs. I definitely wouldn't have been that cool. When Yubaba's like yelling at her, when the baby grabs her, oh my god.
That baby, so malevolent.
When she like invites No Face onto the train and is like, you can come, but you can't eat anybody. I was like, what?
She's so like charming.
She's just
that
gutty
kid.
and
yeah.
I was so inspired by her as a kid. And I think that's amazing that a director who has that power sees a gap in the kind of media that's being produced and says, we can fill that gap and let's fill that gap. And does it beautifully and kindly and with, grace and honor, but also I think one of the coolest things, I'm sorry I'm talking a lot right now, but is that she's not a perfect character. Like the women characters, the kids or whatever, they're not like flawless beings, which is just great because you get that a lot too. You get the Hermiones where it's like, I'm pretty much perfect, and you're like, well, that's not inspiring. I don't relate to that.
We also the other thing we were talking about before was on the topic of like appreciating as an adult and appreciating as a child.
You cut me off.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, it's okay. I don't remember, so go ahead.
Oh. Pixar movies are they're kind of like, it's that Simpsons model of there are two like levels.
There are two stories going on. Yeah,
and one level is for the adults watching with their kids. So there's like kind of like funny adult jokes and like
there's
references that only
like
adults would get.
Pixar is known for their innuendo and their like clever jokes.
Yeah.
And I think like it's not all like sexual innuendo, but it's really
It's adult
funny.
humor.
Like it's funny. Like I keep going back to that phone numbers thing. I thought that was so funny in Inside Out. You haven't seen it, but we'll watch it. In Inside Out, they have these like memory orbs, and these two cleaners are going around, and they're like, "What do we get rid? Gotta make some new space. Get rid. Should we keep these old phone numbers?" It's like, nah, get rid of them. We're never gonna use them. And that's so funny because every adult watching the movie is like, the only phone numbers I have memorized are the ones that I like grew up having to know, and like kids don't really get it, but it's like it's really funny, and I do think it's clever.
No, it takes a great deal of skill
Yeah.
to do that, to interweave those two emotional registers of like adult and child,
and especially with innuendo too, like because there are some racy jokes in Pixar movies, which I think is like fine. I don't think it's like tainting it at any way.
Whatever.
And
the kids don't get it anyway.
Kids don't get it, and then it's like,
Don't
and then it's more, it's a very different experience. Like watching it as an adult, you feel like you're being led into a club, and it makes it more bearable if you're going to go see them with your kids.
With your child,
So it's like it's smart on like many different levels.
Families are gonna watch this, so we need to keep the adults entertained as much as the kids, but like with different things.
Yeah, and I will say I don't think it's like a bad approach at all. I think it's really funny. I think it works very well for like Western culture, and I do think it kind of keeps the nostalgia factor as well. So when you watch it when you're older, you remember watching it as a kid and being like, I didn't get that, and now I do. So it's like fun.
The thesis statement here is that Pixar movies operate on two different like humorous and like syntactical levels. So there's two different emotional registers going on there. But the idea with Ghibli is that it's the same thing throughout. It's like the child appreciates the same things as the adult, and there's no
For different
like,
reasons though.
Well, yeah, but the point is that there's no two divergent
Yeah.
emotional
Two-
registers. There's just one through line of things that both of you, and like you're an adult and you watch it and you're like, you know, you appreciate the same things that the kid appreciates, essentially.
I think you know, you obviously appreciate the art style more, or whatever it is more, but I think the interesting thing about the Ghibli experience, watching it as a child and then watching it as an adult, is that as a kid, you're filled with wonder and excitement and adventure, and then as an adult, for me, am I adult? I don't know. For me now, I'm filled with nostalgia for being filled with wonder and excitement. Like, as a kid, you're like, maybe it is real. And as an adult, you can never really get back to maybe it is real. It just helps you remember the magic that you did feel as a child. That's how it is for me, at least.
Yeah. I think it's that same thing of, it's technically impressive, the Pixar movies. It's, like, architecturally very, like, astounding, basically, that they can have this, like, intricate semantic work where the jokes are available to this segment of the audience, but, like, and the kids won't get it, but that's okay.
It's like 4D chess.
Like, and there's less of that architecture in Ghibli. It's not as clever, but I think I actually appreciate
The
that
simplicity,
more, generally. Like,
Pixar has to wrangle with different ages and also current social climate. I think that they're very aware of, you know, the trends, and like a lot of what they do affects so much that they have to kind of be aware of their topical environment in order to make content that's like relevant. But I think the beautiful thing about Ghibli films is they have never really felt like they were manufactured for a time. They were more manufactured for, again, like the gap or something that's missing, not to add to something that's like trending. I think that's why they feel a bit more timeless to me as well.
this video has been derailed by me remembering Cars, and it's just stalking through the back of my head. Cars?
There's a lot of...
What an insane premise for a movie.
Can they be ridden?
Something a coked up exec was like, we need to sell more car figures. What if the cars
What if they're
talk?
cars?
Yeah, it's that. A studio exec fucking does a rail of coke off his table, looks out the window at the parking lot, he's like, those cars, they have eyes, they have
That's
lights.
it.
They look like they have...
Oh, yeah, let's make a movie, baby. What,
Legally
do they
parked?
Is that car have eyelashes?
Holy shit.
That's so
The
fucking
headlights
brilliant.
are- what if they could
and
talk?
they could race,
Here's
and there's a
$10
sexy car.
million. Our neighbors are home, too. Someone sits and like
Yeah.
have the idea,
Yeah.
and then they just have like $1 billion to throw at the idea.
Okay, tell me that Ratatouille was not like, Ratatouille, what if it was a rat? Oh, have you ever had
He's a
Ratatouille?
chef.
At a fine dining.
Vegetables,
Paris.
spicy
He goes to
vegetables.
Fat
And
chef?
he controls his... Stop. Jesus Christ. You're gonna get evicted. But like, and then Miyazaki, I imagine, is much more sedate, like
He's definitely smoking weed.
smoking the crack
If-
instead of snorting.
Yeah,
it.
if Pixar's Coke, Miyazaki's just...
This isn't a very family. This went from like really family friendly to
I know.
completely. We can't put any ads on this. We're not gonna.
We're not gonna make
Hey,
any.
man,
We're not gonna make any money.
Unduly harsh on Pixar. Pixar's fine. I like Pixar movies.
In closing, Pixar movies are fine as movies, but Ghibli films are works of art.
Yeah.
And I think when you get down to it, it's not really fair to compare works of art with
Yeah, works of
entertainment.
entertainment,
And there's nothing wrong with entertainment. I love Pixar films. I love watching them, and some of them are so moving and so beautiful and technically very impressive and fun. Like, they're so fun, and there are moments in all of those films that, you know, make me really emotional and whatever.
Take her to the moon for me.
But I do think that Studio Ghibli films and Miyazaki films, they just hit different.
I also think there's just baseline value in like consuming media that doesn't have American resonances.
It feels very insular sometimes. It's like,
Yeah, but like, you know, the neural resonances there are like happy endings, Hollywood, like all that is very much present, which isn't like inherently a terrible thing. But Miyazaki operates in a completely different like epistemic framework, I find.
like going back to how I even watched one in the first place. Growing up in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was very hard to find any Studio Ghibli films, and I think my mom had like heard about it from someone who said that there was this studio that did these weird films, and she thought it was really cool. You have to know something about my mother. She really wanted us to consume diverse cultural media, so she would like seek out ethnically divergent, like
Bibles.
not Bibles, but like children's books. We had a lot of children's books from all over the world. So she really valued giving us like different narratives and different stories and characters and people and cultures. And so when she heard about the Ghibli film, she like busted her balls to find it, which mattered so much. Like as a kid, seeing, you become so used to the things that you see around you that seeing another story told from a different perspective in a different country has so much value. And maybe this isn't really relevant at this point because, you know, you could access any cultural media zeitgeist
You can access
instantly,
it, but
like,
only one has the power, and that's America.
that's true.
I don't want to imply that, like, Pixar is American and Ghibli is Japanese, and Japanese is
Better,
mystic and
yeah.
unknowable and thus better. Because it's actually, like, if you look at Ghibli movies, I'm sure there are, like, a lot of Japanese influences, but I think it's more, like, global than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of them also incorporate, like, plenty of European, like, mythological background.
I think Howl's feels very European,
Right, yeah,
doesn't
Howl's,
it?
like, but the whole idea of, like, knights and dragons and that, like, that peculiarly Western European fantasy world. The whole idea of borrowers is a very, like...
It's like Gaelic and...
I think those all
yeah.
come from, like,
He didn't, like, come
American
up with
novels.
borrowers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all, that whole
But
concept
yeah.
exists. And, like, fairies and stuff are very, as you're saying, like, Gaelic.
I almost, like, I want to read a thesis on this. I just, like, it feels like there is so much to know about Ghibli films because you're not given it all the information and because you can tell that it's just so rich. And I think with Pixar films, because the universes they choose are so small and, you know, typically, like, they will pull references from specific things, but it's typically, like, a completely constructed universe, like Inside Out. This is how the inside of the brain works. We have come up with this, and yes, there are references to other things, but it's, like, this is the thing that we've made, and here it is.
Yeah.
And with Ghibli films, it's like,
Radish,
this is your universe,
duck.
this is the magic universe, and look at the spot that they intersect, and look at what happens when they intersect. Typically, the protagonists are children, and I think it's almost like the child is also at the intersection of the real world and the magic world.
Right.
And you know what I also really fucking love? The parents don't all die. Oh my god, if Western media does not kill off all parents. I remember when I was watching Totoro for the first time with Maddie, the mom is, like, really sick, and I was like, if she fucking dies, and she doesn't, she gets better, and then they all go home together, and Totoro is not needed at the end because he's kind of this, like, surrogate forest spirit comfort bubble man, bunny,
I mean,
bear.
it's the classic, like in Western media, the parents have to die to give the kids, like, to let them be orphans.
Yeah, but they don't have to die. They don't always have to die, okay?
Yeah, you don't have to kill the parents.
Don't kill your parents. The final bonus category, this is speed round, is franchise. And basically it's just kind of like the world that exists around the films.
Yeah, it's money. I mean,
Pixar,
I hate to say it, but that's the point, right? Like, why did they make a Toy Story 4? Did anyone want that?
they're making another one.
Right. Ghibli's not going to make Spirited Away 2 Redux.
Spirit Away 2, too fast, too way too spirited.
2, The Return
My
of
neighbor
Totoro.
Totoro.
Totoro, that's it. That's really, like, the cynicism killer to Ghibli movies, I feel like. I'm, like, fairly cynical, I think, in a lot of, like, the media I consume.
How are you?
Well, but, like, you know, people accuse me of, like, being very cynical of Pixar, and I'm like, yeah, but, like, I don't feel the remotest impulse to be cynical with Ghibli movies. Like, it completely kills the cynic in me. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is magic, this is childhood, and these are perfect.
So I think that's it.
This has been a Cars hate video.
Also, I just want everyone to see that I really went all in on my Studio Ghibli fit today. No, don't do that. They
Anyway,
have
so,
to
as I was
see.
saying...
Hey.
Cars. We've all seen it. We all know what it's about. How the fuck did that happen? I'm Anthony Padilla, and
I'm Anthony Padilla.
Cars.
Today we're talking to 5 different cars to see what they thought about the wonderful world of cars.
I'll be interviewing 5 cars to ask them how they felt about their representation.
You're a Ford. Did you see any specific Fords, or were they all brandless cars? And how did that make you feel? Oh, you're you're a car. Thanks for watching. Bye.
This summer, one man